Nathaniel Shepard is a billionaire and CEO of Genesis, a space agency under NASA, and will launch a mission for the first time to explore the planet Mars. He is so obsessed with the red planet, not only exploring it but also colonizing it. He introduced 6 astronauts who will travel to the planet Mars. One of them is Sarah Elliot as chief astronaut, who will lead the inaugural journey of the mission. During the journey to the planet Mars, astronaut Sarah Elliot is pregnant. Scientists at NASA suggest that the mission must be stopped. It is impossible for a pregnant astronaut to be able to successfully carry out the mission. When her spacecraft landed on the planet Mars, she gave birth to a baby boy named Gardner Elliot. The harsh terrain and unfriendly environmental conditions around Mars made Sarah experience prolonged convulsions or eclampsia, which eventually took her life. On Earth, Nathaniel watched Sarah's death so regretfully, he could only mourn her. While Gardner's father is still unknown, Nathaniel keeps Gardner's whereabouts on Mars a secret. He decides not to bring Gardner right away, because he is afraid that the extreme environmental differences between Earth and Mars could affect and endanger his health, so Gardner remains classified. Nathaniel looked very devastated by the incident. He vented it by flying a vehicle into space through a simulator. 16 years later, Gardner Elliot grows up to be a handsome and smart teenager. He has a friend, a robot, named Centaur, who is his best friend, teacher and roommate. He tries to gain access to the personal belongings of his late mother by hacking it. Since he was a baby, Gardner has been cared for by Kendra Wyndham, who has treated him like his own child. On Mars, he has routines such as taking care of hydroponic plants and other research. He found a ring and a flash drive containing a video, where Sarah, her mother and a man were at a beach house on Earth. Gardner was convinced that the man was his father, so he decided to search and find him. In an internet chat room, he meets Tulsa, a bright street girl from Colorado who lives in an orphanage. Gardner told Tulsa that he lived in a penthouse at Park Avenue. He couldn't go out to see her because he had osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bone disease, caused by a genetic disorder. Feeling hopeless and frustrated with the boring state of Mars, one evening, Gardner goes out alone with no one to escort him. He visits his mother's grave. Bored with his life on Mars, he vents his emotions by riding his rover at high speed, then flips over and almost harms him. Lucky Kendra comes and saves him. Kendra is confused as to how Gardner got out on his own, without an escort, so Gardner says. He grew up in a bubble and surrounded by scientists. It's not that hard to just break out through all the security codes. Kendra explained to Gardner that his mother's grave was only symbolic, while the ashes of her body had been dumped into the Pacific Ocean on Earth. Gardner was just stunned and shed tears when he heard the fact that Kendra had just said. Kendra made a video call to Nathaniel and the director of Genesis, Tom Chen. Kendra said that Gardner had a very intelligent IQ and she wanted Gardner to be allowed to go to Earth, but Nathaniel refused on the grounds that Gardner had to undergo a risky operation first, to increase his bone density, and train hard in order to adapt to the atmospheric pressure, as well as the environment on Earth. When Kendra told Gardner about his trip to Earth, he was overjoyed. And a series of exercises were carried out beforehand. The day that Gardner has been waiting for has come. He is going to Earth. Gardner asks Kendra about his father's whereabouts on Earth, but she doesn't know anything about his father. Even though Gardner is sad, he still believes he will find his father. He also asked, how will he interact with humans on Earth, while Kendra just smiled in response. Nathaniel was shocked when he found out that Gardner was no longer on Mars, so he went to NASA to confirm it. Meanwhile, Gardner is almost reaching the Earth. He looks so excited. The spacecraft successfully landed on Earth, and they were greeted by NASA. Gardner looked so amazed, he looked around where there was water in the sea, that he had never seen while on Mars. He also felt his weight increase, due to the pressure difference between Earth and Mars, and he seems a little troubled when walking. Gardner was immediately taken to the inspection facility at NASA, to confirm his condition. Nathaniel came into his room, and with a bit of amazement, he looked at him. Apparently Gardner was looking forward to taking a walk in the air on Earth, but Nathaniel argued that he would have to wait a while, to adjust things between Earth and Mars. Gardner had to pass a few more tests. It pissed him off, so he left quarantine by breaking all security. On his escape, Gardner found a dead end. But he was not at his wit's end. He wore the clothes of one of the employees there to disguise, and managed to trick the security officers. Then he gets into a delivery truck and leave NASA. After getting off the truck, he walked aimlessly. He greeted everyone he met, and it looks funny. It rained. This was what Gardner had been waiting for the most. When people take shelter, he even goes into the rain, and people look at him strangely. Then he takes a bus to Colorado to look for Tulsa, the girl of his dreams. Nathaniel and Kendra continue to look for Gardner. Kendra tells Nathaniel that Gardner has a girlfriend on Earth named Tulsa. Gardner arrived at the Tulsa campus. He finally met her, but not a warm welcome he received, a slap from Tulsa for being disappointed with him. He no longer replied to the letters she sent. Gardner argued that he was on his way to meet her, but it seems Tulsa is still upset. As to whether the trip should take up to 7 months, Gardner couldn't get into specifics, because Tulsa would not have believed it right away when he explained the truth. When Tulsa was in class, suddenly Gardner came and joined in. He was acting weird and funny, which made the whole class laugh. Tulsa again asked Gardner, where exactly is he from? Gardner spontaneously said that he was from Mars. This annoyed Tulsa. She felt that Gardner was not serious. Then Gardner showed the photo of his mother and the man he was carrying, saying that they are his parents. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and Kendra managed to find out where Tulsa lives. They head there and try to convince Gardner to return to NASA, but Gardner ignores him. He runs away. Kendra chases him, but Tulsa appears riding a field sprinkler and tells Gardner to ride with her. During the escape, the ship suddenly ran out of fuel and was forced to land in the middle of a traffic. The ship continued to speed out of control towards a warehouse and exploded, but before that, Tulsa and Gardner had jumped and saved themselves. Nathaniel and Kendra suspected that they had died in the explosion. The NASA team came to investigate, but they did not find any bodies in the debris of the explosion. They concluded that Gardner and Tulsa managed to escape and left. Tulsa steals a car at the repair shop, pretending that they are the owner of the car. Then they drive off to find Gardner's father. On the way, Tulsa asks who Nathaniel and Kendra are and why they are so curious to catch Gardner. Then Gardner says that they are part of the Mars mission. Tulsa gets annoyed and tells Gardner to get off, and don't brag all the time. But in the end they get back in the car and leave. There was a funny thing after that. When Gardner saw someone riding a horse, because he had never seen before, he was shocked, and of course this made Tulsa even more annoyed. They stopped at a restaurant, then using a tablet belonging to someone who was going to the toilet. They found out the location of the man in his mother's video. Then they found out a man named Shaman Neka, the person who had married Gardner's parents. But they have to leave again because in the parking lot there are police coming. Meanwhile, Nathaniel finds a car that is similar to the car used by Tulsa and Gardner, but it turns out that he is the wrong person, and they are not the person he is looking for. Elsewhere, Nathaniel and Kendra realize that the troponin in Gardner's body has increased. This is dangerous and can cause swelling of his heart. It is caused by the atmospheric pressure and Earth's gravity, which Gardner cannot accept. He must be returned to Mars immediately, if he wants to survive. On the sidelines of his escape, Gardner discovered many new things that he had never found on Mars. They were shopping. Tulsa bought Gardner appropriate clothes, which made him look more presentable and handsome. So fascinated, Gardner kept telling Tulsa that she was very beautiful. It made her feel uncomfortable, but in the end Tulsa melted and liked all the attitudes Gardner showed. On their way, they spend the night setting up camp. Tulsa plays a romantic song from a car tape. Here, Gardner kisses a girl for the first time, Tulsa, then they spend the night together. The next morning, they continue their search for Shaman Neka. When they meet him, they ask if he ever married Gardner's parents. Neka looks through the files and finds a receipt for the marriage payment. Then Tulsa uses the computer to find the location of the beachfront house on the receipt. Eventually they found out where the house was. It was in Summerland, California, but suddenly Gardner's nose bled and he hid it from Tulsa. On the way, they stopped in Las Vegas for a little fun to unwind. Then suddenly Gardner passed out from exhaustion and was taken to the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, the results of X-ray scans showed the presence of carbon tubes in Gardner's bones. This was what finally made Tulsa believe that Gardner's origins were indeed from the planet Mars. Gardner realized that he could not stay on Earth any longer because of his weakening condition. He wanted to meet his father before he died. Tulsa helped him to escape from the hospital. Then they went to the beach house. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and Kendra have found out where Gardner and Tulsa are and where they are heading to. Even though Gardner's condition was getting worse, he still insisted on going to the beach house. When Tulsa and Gardner got there, they met the man in the video belonging to Gardner's mother. It turned out that the man was Sarah's brother, not Gardner's father, who was wanted. Gardner thought that all this was a lie, so he ran into the sea and told Tulsa that this is where he wanted to die, with his mother. Then he threw himself into the sea. Tulsa panicked and screamed for help. Nathaniel and Kendra arrived just in time to save Gardner by performing CPR. When he wakes up, Gardner asks Nathaniel about Sarah. Nathaniel says that he loves her very much. It makes Gardner realize that Nathaniel is his real father. Nathaniel, Kendra, and Tulsa rush to Dream Chaser, a NASA facility for a rocket launch, where they will launch into orbit, in the hope that this will stabilize Gardner's condition, free from Earth's gravity, and bring him back to life. But Gardner still didn't wake up from his coma. Then Nathaniel took control of the plane to fly higher, to the stratosphere or the outer layer of the Earth. When they reached zero gravity, finally Gardner woke up from his coma. Soon after, they return to Earth, and Gardner prepares to board the shuttle with his father Nathaniel back to Mars, but before that, he bids an emotional goodbye to his adoptive mother Kendra. And also his lover, Tulsa. Kendra decided to retire from NASA, then she asked Tulsa to stay with her, and she accepted it happily. Tulsa was determined to join NASA, and meet Gardner again on planet Mars. She also underwent a series of training right there. Meanwhile, Gardner has arrived on Mars, and lives with Nathaniel, his father, happily, along. With the end of the movie. That's all the recap.